Okay, so first of all, then just have a little think about how many of these are in your workplace at the moment. So these are all things from my mental health first aid training materials that came up. And it's interesting in the things that made a workplace a really good one for well-being. And I know that teaching in general at the moment, I don't think generally hits many of these. So obviously it's a little bit more tricky given the situation in teaching at the moment. So we've got give individuals greater autonomy. So if you've got more choices about how you complete your work, then you're more likely to enjoy it. Involve people in decision making. So I know I've worked for a lot of people where, for example, you have an hours-long staff meeting about something and everyone makes a decision about what happens, and then management just kind of do their own thing anyway. You're thinking, well, not only have they not listened, but we've also wasted an hour of our lives. So that's always a little bit depressing. And train line managers to ensure they can manage delegation of control and decision making. I think over the years I've come across a lot of year group leaders and line managers that are just not trained, and they're like promoted too early without any extra training. And it's, you know, it's very daunting as well for somebody who is a line manager to be thrust into that position without the relevant training. Promote good leadership and relationships. So just making sure that you are, you know, living by your own moral code and values, and showing those things as you move around the school, etc. Employees buy into organisational goals. So you've got shared goals that you all decide on, that you all buy into. And I think sometimes in teaching you'll have these really nice sort of sayings and you have nice mission statements, etc. But when it comes down to it, I'm not sure underneath that we always manage in schools to hit all those things, particularly even if it's really good for the children, it's not always really good for the staff. Greater flexibility in the workplace, that's always a bit of a challenge. I was saying to somebody earlier that teaching is all about children unless it comes to your own children. So, you know, just those small things like allowing you to go and watch your child's school play, for example. And I've had jobs before where I haven't even wanted to ask because I knew that the answer would be no. So I had to try and kind of get around it another way because I didn't really want to miss things like that. And it just makes a really big difference for employees. I've heard of situations where employees have needed to go to funerals and they said, well, no, you can't go because it's not a family member. And really shouldn't have to make those choices. Rewarding commitment and effort. I think that depends on the school you work in. So some are probably much better than others at that. Reducing stress and ensuring early interventions. So I know that one school that I've heard of has got, rather than exit interviews, it's got stay interviews. So they look throughout the year at people's well-being and just interviewing. I think it's probably part of the PMR process, but they're just really interested in their well-being and find out from people what they want to do to move forward in that area, which is really nice. So whereas exit interviews, if you've had a bad time, it's a time to vent and say what you want to about the organisation. It's kind of too late then. So if they want to keep staff with retention wise, I think people just need to think about it a little bit sooner. So how can we improve the situation? I've just got some ideas that you could take back into your school. So petitioning your SLT to start a wellbeing committee. That isn't all about cake and yoga, because obviously those things are nice, but doesn't really get to the crux of the matter in your organisation. So wellbeing committees have been variable across the schools that I have worked in, and some of them have got like a small budget of, I don't know, £100 a term to do stuff with, and that's a little bit limiting in what you can actually do. They have made little differences, but I think generally your wellbeing committee, if you can get involved with something like that, is the important thing is to get a governor on board as well, or a trustee, and actually change the organisation as a whole rather than just kind of do add-ons that aren't actually sort of focusing on the main issues. See if you can all do a mental health first aid qualification as part of your whole school continuing professional development. So I know that a lot of schools at the moment are going down the trauma-informed practices, which are really good for the children. But actually, the mental health first aid side of things are really good for staff as well. And I think if there's more awareness of it overall, then it's more likely that you're going to be in a situation where your workplace cares about your well-being, if there's more opportunities to do that. So having a staff meeting to set a wellbeing policy to support everyone, and the head included, because I think sometimes head teachers, they have got a serious amount of pressure on them, and actually they're pushing the pressure out to everybody else, whether they should or whether they shouldn't. Their behaviour sometimes is stemmed from stress, and they're not dealing with it in a very good way themselves. So that wellbeing policy to support everybody, get governors and trustees involved again, because everybody needs to understand the pressure that everybody is under in order to make a positive change there. Also, as a school, setting those healthy communication boundaries. So whether you're getting emails at the weekend, for example, or emails or a WhatsApp group early in the morning. So thinking about when either people are sending communication and also when you are receiving it, and that will be on the other side about your boundaries. But I think as a school, if you set those boundaries, I mean, I've been told off before for sort of messaging at midnight because sort of in an email, just because that was when I chose to work, and my head said, oh, you can set it to you can set it a timer, so you can time it so it arrives at sort of 7:30 in the morning, so you can write it when you want to, and then you can actually arrive at a different time, which was quite handy. So that kind of solved that problem. So just making sure that the rules the union set out are followed. So for example, directed time, your lunch duty, etc., because teachers shouldn't be doing lunch duties in the UK, and we shouldn't be missing our planning time for other things. So just making sure that your school is playing by the rules for those things. I know in practice it's quite difficult with the staff shortages, and we're always yes people, but just pointing those things out when they're not put in place properly. Reflecting on how far you are willing to go in your individual circumstances in order to improve things. Because I know in previous settings, it's all very well being a bit militant about it, but actually if nobody else is on board, it is a bit like banging your head against a brick wall. So you don't necessarily want to stick your head up. You want to do the right thing, but if your job's going to be on the line at the end of the day, you need to be a bit careful with how it's perceived. So I think just whatever your situation is, if you can get a few people together to take these things to your senior leadership team, and if they're good employers, then they should be listening to anything about wellbeing anyway. So hopefully they can take some of these on board and let you run with it. So it'll be quite telling if you take any of these ideas to your leadership team and they say no. It's like, well, what sort of organisation am I working for then if they can't even spend time on staff wellbeing? And of course, consider what you wish to do if nothing improves. So if you're in a difficult situation and you try some of these things and nothing improves, just have to think about where you want to go from there, really.